The seagulls wheel, they turn and dive. The mountain stands beside the sea. This world we know turns round and round, and all for them, and you and me. The water is wide. I cannot cross over. Neither have I wings. Give me a boat. Both shall roll. My love and
Good morning. Our gathering song is by Reggie Harris, whom some of you may remember from his performance Deeper Than the Skin with Greg Greenway a few months ago here at UUCD. Reggie and Pete were great friends and mutual admirers, and this song was written by Reggie and his partner Kim the morning after Pete died. And we will sing it for you now. We're going to sing the chorus first. Words are in your order of service.
High over the Hudson, sails headed for home. Hot on the breeze as it cuts through the trees. Pete, you're not sailing alone. You're high over the Hudson. You still got one hell of a view. Your battles are won and your journey's begun. Pete was singing with you.
The news came over the internet. Pete Seeger went sailing today. Set out on the Hudson about 9 o'clock, searching for new songs to play. He passed by Bear Mountain, making great time as the water slapped hard on the bow. At Storm King he turned that boat into the wind, set the old Woody G on the prow.
Now you're high over the Hudson, sails headed for home. Hard on the breeze as it cuts through the trees. Pete, you're not sailing alone. You're high over the Hudson. You still got one hell of a view. Your battles are won and your journey's begun. Pete was singing with you. Of time and rivers flowing, the seasons make a song, and we who live beside her still try to sing along.
troubadours, life has its ups and its downs. Of that there's so much that's been said. Pete spoke out for justice year after year, a leader who actually led. He sang out for freedom, he sang out for peace, he taught through the power of song. Ahead of his time in all seasons of life, he kept us all singing along.
Now you're high over the Hudson, sails headed for home. Hard on the breeze as it cuts through the trees. Pete, you're not sailing alone. You're high over the Hudson. You still got one hell of a view. Your battles are won, a new journey's begun. Pete, we're singing with you. So many homeless sailors, so many winds that blow. I asked the half-blind scholar which way the currents flow. Odetta and Mary say, welcome, good friend. And Woody and Faith both agree that you lived your passion for 94 years and you lived it with integrity. Now we as your children and we as your friends take up your mission of song. As Toshi yells out with a smile on her lips,
Hey, Peter, what took you so long? Now you're high over the Hudson, sails headed for home. Hard on the breeze as it cuts through the trees. Pete, you're not sailing alone. You're high over the Hudson. You still got one hell of a view. Your battles are won, a new journey's begun. Pete, we're singing with you. And we who would join in can stand aside no longer. Now let us all begin. High over the Hudson. Good morning, all, and welcome to Pete Seeger's Golden Thread. I'm Nancy Hershatter, but most of you know that already. These are my dear friends Paul Storfer and Sandy Lieb, fellow members of Walkabout Clearwater Chorus, a group founded by Pete Seeger in the mid-1980s. Among us, we have over 6 decades of singing Pete Seeger songs, and they would also like me to know that I'm responsible for introducing them to one another. It was one of my better moves. They will celebrate their 2nd wedding anniversary in October. Little side here. Today we'll be talking, I forgot to say, in Paul's and my case, we have rehearsed, performed, and recorded with Pete over a period of 25 years. Today we'll be talking about the life of Pete Seeger. How could we talk about Pete without singing his music? The songs we will sing today were either written by or collaborated on by Pete. And if you knew Pete, you know that we expect you to sing along. The words are available in the order of service. Now please join Deb in the chalice lighting affirmation. Words in your order of service.
Before we actually go to me, we jumped the welcome.
Oh,
Yes.
well, okay, let's back
Good
her up
morning.
then, please.
So
Listen
Mary
to
Ann's going to
Ann
fill us
and her
in.
words of welcome and announcements.
Okay. Welcome to the online service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Danbury. We're so glad that each of you are able to join us this morning. Together, in community, we can ensure that social distancing does not mean social disengagement. Our Our weekly services are more than just a gathering of our physical bodies. It is the forming of a sacred time that we make together. Whether you are well versed in the technology of teleconferencing, or this is your first venture, we welcome you. For those of you new among us or reconnecting with fond hearts, we invite you to introduce yourselves and note where you're connecting from in the chat box as you are comfortable. Whatever the faith and traditions of your past, whatever your theological stance, whatever your heritage, whoever you are and whomever you love, we welcome you. You can learn more about us on our website and Facebook page. We encourage you to share our Facebook page and reach out to others who may be isolated at this time and may benefit from this spiritual connection with our loving community. And now for a few announcements. Next Sunday, August 1st, there is a meet and greet with our new minister, Reverend Kathleen. Join us on Sunday afternoon, August 1st, for a meet and greet with Reverend Kathleen Rudolph. We plan to meet outdoors on the lawn at UU Danbury, but if it rains, we'll move indoors. Bring a lawn chair, your own snack, and a drink, if you like. Families with children and high-risk individuals are encouraged to come between 12:30 and 1, during which time masks will be required for all. After that, between 1 and 2:30, anyone is welcome and masks will be optional. Note, if we have to move indoors, masks will need to be worn as at any other time we are inside the building at UUCD. Finally, after our service, we invite you to stay and participate in a breakout group for individual connection and deeper check-in. Again, welcome to the UU Congregation of Danbury, where we welcome all in a spirit of compassion, inquiry, and service, and we encourage you to sing along today.
Thank you, Marianne. And now if you could grab your chalice and something to light it with, and then we will, having a little trouble with mine over here. It doesn't seem to want to light. There we go. All right, we can say our chalice lighting words together. Love is the spirit of this congregation and justice is its light. This is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek and speak the truth in love, to help one another and celebrate life. And now I would like to invite all of the young people and children forward. If you could all come forward for the screen. We're going to now enfold you into our service as well. And we're going to do our children's affirmation. I kind of like these affirmations right next to each other. All right. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are people with open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. We care for the earth and each other. And now Nancy is going to lead us in a story. I think this is one you wrote.
Yes, you're right, Deb. So stay close to the screen, children. For that matter, adults can come close to the screen too. The story is called Once Upon a River. It's a story of a very special ship and of the man whose idea it was, Mr. Pete Seeger. Once Upon a River by Nancy Hershatter. The Hudson River is a beautiful long river that begins as a tiny bubbling stream at Lake Tyr in the clouds, high up in the Adirondack Mountains of New York State. Excuse me. It tumbles down out of the mountains and flows through farmland, through the city of Albany, and on down the Hudson Valley on its way to New York City and out to the Atlantic Oceans. The Hudson River is very special in the sense that it's an estuary. In fact, the Native Americans called it the river that flows both ways. So it responds to the tides. Sometimes it flows north, sometimes it flows south. So we're going to sing a piece of a little song by Rick Nestler. He tells the story. Once a sachem told the story of a land the Great Spirit blessed, and the people followed the legend from the great waters in the west. And they stopped where they found that the fishing was good, the earth it was fertile, game ran in the woods. Now I could be happy just spending my days on the river that flows both ways. Sing out, I could be happy just spending my days on the river that flows both ways. The river that flows both ways, the Hudson. Now, 300 years ago, before there were trucks or trains, enormous wooden sailing ships called sloops sailed up and down the Hudson. They carried timber and furs from the mountain forests. They transported the farmers' corn, squash, and beans to market. As the years went by, though, the Hudson River began to get dirtier and dirtier. Men came and built factories along the riverbank, and because it was easy and convenient, the factories began dumping their garbage in the river. Soon even the fish couldn't live there anymore. One summer afternoon back in 1965, a man named Pete Seeger was tacking back and forth on the river in his small sailboat. Pete and his wife, Toshi, were raising their 3 children in a cabin on the mountainside, high above the river. It made Pete Seeger sad to see how dirty and unhealthy the once beautiful Hudson had become. He was a singer and a song collector, but he was also someone who cared deeply about taking care of the earth, living peacefully with all kinds of people. Mr. Seeger had been reading a book called Sloops of the Hudson about those beautiful wooden boats from the olden days, and he thought, what if we could build a boat like those beautiful old sloops and bring people down to the river to go sailing? It might make people realize what we've lost. Perhaps if enough of us work together, we can clean up the river and get the people to stop dumping their garbage in the water. The more Pete Seeger talked, the more people listened. They held picnics and gave concerts and raised money to build their sloop. Wherever people gathered, there was always lots of singing. After 3 years, they had enough money and they found a boat builder way up on the coast of Maine by the name of Harvey Gamage. Now, this is a picture of Pete raising money by singing. It's not a picture of Mr. Gamage, but Mr. Gamage and his workers had learned the boat building craft from their fathers and their grandfathers, who had learned it from their fathers and grandfathers, going back more than 200 years. They built the mast of the boat from an oak tree more than 108 feet tall. The hull or body of the boat was also made, the hull or the body of the boat was also made of strong wooden timbers, and the tiller, which steers the boat, was carved in the shape of a human hand. And that's the tiller. That's a photograph of the tiller there. Next page. At last, in August of 1969, the boat was ready to set sail on its maiden voyage from the coast of Maine to the mouth of the Hudson River in New York City. On its journey down the coast of New England, Clearwater and its crew stopped all along the way to give concerts and to talk to people about taking care of our precious planet. And every year since 1969, more than 50 years ago, the sloop Clearwater has sailed up and down the river, teaching school children about the river, bringing families out for a sail, helping people fall in love with the beauty of the Hudson River and its valley so that they will want to care for and protect it. The Hudson River is much cleaner now. Many fish have returned to spawn and to live there. Laws have been passed to keep factories from dumping garbage in the river. And each summer, families come down to the river to fish and swim. People have even visited from halfway across the world, Russia, Australia, to learn the lessons of Clearwater so that they can clean up their own polluted waterways. Which goes to show you one person can make a difference. And now, join Deb for our words of our shared milestone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy. What a terrific, terrific story. We are a community that uplifts and embraces, and as such, our joys and sorrows help us to hold each other in thoughts and action. We'd like you to take this opportunity to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. Nancy, Sandy, and Paul will play and sing for us while we do this.
This is a song written by Pete in his later years about friendship.
When I think of the ways that I've grown, I know I couldn't have made it alone. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known.
Here we are all in one place, all gathered together. We've helped each other down this road, whatever the weather. We have no need for pots of gold, for friends are a treasure. So join hands and sing it again.
Oh, when I think of the ways that I've grown, I know I couldn't have made it alone. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known. Many years ago when I was feeling discouraged, I found that singing with my friends would fill me with courage. It's a rough and rocky road we're on, so when we get worried, we'll join hands and sing it again. Oh, when I think of the ways that I've grown, I know I couldn't have made it alone. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known.
Looks like we might sing all day, but looks are deceiving. That old clock upon the wall says we've got to be leaving. And though we go our separate ways, there's no need for grieving.
Just join hands and sing it again. Oh, when I think of the ways that I've grown, I know I couldn't have made it alone. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known. I owe a lot to the sharing, caring, daring, wonderful friends that I've known.
Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Before we move actually to our offering, I want to share with you a conversation that I had with Reverend Rudolph. And we were talking about the real importance of our joys and sorrows and the ritual that how it grounds our service and how important it is. And, you know, she was talking about ways in which we could more highlight and really take in what people have said, you know, really sort of hold it. And so what I really want to do just before we jump into the offering is just take a minute and sit with what people have shared. And, you know, if you pray, then say a little prayer. If you meditate, then just take a second. We're just going to take a few moments of silence before we move into our offering. And now it is time for our congregational offering. If you are a guest with us today, we're just so happy that you're here. Please pass the virtual plate. Members and friends, you can give your contributions several ways. There is going to be a link that will be provided in the chat, which is probably the simple way, most direct way. You can also, if you're very old school like me, send a check to UUCD at 24 Clapboard Ridge Road. And now if everyone would please join me in our congregational response. In the spirit of compassion and service, we dedicate these, our offerings.
To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to gain, a time to lose, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time of love, a time of hate, a time of peace. I swear it's not too late. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven.
Okay. Pete Seeger was born on May 3rd of 1919 in New York City, the youngest of three sons born to Charles Seeger, a musicologist, and Constance Seeger, a classical violinist. Many of Pete's vivid early memories were of exploring the woods and fields around his grandparents' farmhouse in Paterson, New York. In Pete's words, quote, "My mother had hopes that one of her children would play the violin. She bought miniature fiddles for my two older brothers. They rebelled. When I came along, my father said, 'Oh, let Peter enjoy himself.' But she left musical instruments all around the house. I remember having fun at age 4 or 5, making a racket on autoharp, penny whistle, marimba, a push-pull accordion, a piano, a pump organ, all by ear. When Pete was 2, his parents packed up all 3 boys and loaded their Model T Ford for a trip into the Appalachian Mountains with the goal of introducing the natives to the world of classical music. The senior Seegers soon realized that they had much more to learn than they had to teach. 35 years later, Pete and his wife Toshi loaded up their 3 children for a year-long musical trip around the world, during which they lived among and learned from cultures from Indonesia to West Africa to India. But to get back to Pete's childhood for a moment, he was 9 when his parents' marriage broke up. A few years later, his father remarried Ruth Crawford Seeger, who wrote the book American Folk Songs for Children. Charles's second marriage produced 3 half-siblings for Pete, Mike, Peggy, and Penny, who all became musicians. After boarding school and prep school, Pete arrived at Harvard University in 1937 with the goal of becoming a journalist. He dropped out after just a year, and soon after that he met Woody Guthrie, who invited him to hitchhike and ride freight trains, crisscrossing this country and absorbing the rich tapestry of musical traditions of the common folk. During the Spanish Civil War in the late 1930s, Pete was a fervent supporter of the Republican forces fighting against the fascism of Francisco Franco. In 1943, he recorded an album called Songs of the Lincoln Battalion, celebrating the U.S. volunteers that fought against Franco, including the songs There's a Valley in Spain Called Jarama and Viva la Quince Brigada.
Viva la Quince Brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Viva la Quince Brigada, rumba la rumba la rumba la. Que se ha cubierto de gloria, ay Emanuela, ay Emanuela. Que se ha cubierto de gloria, ay Emanuela, ay Emanuela.
In 1948, Pete wrote the first version of his now classic How to Play the 5-String Banjo, a book many banjo players credit with starting them off on the instrument. Inspired by Woody Guthrie, whose guitar was labeled "This Machine Kills Fascists," Pete's banjo is emblazoned with the now famous motto, "This machine surrounds hate and forces it to surrender."
In 1949, Pete was scheduled to sing at a concert featuring Paul Robeson, just north of Peekskill, benefiting the Civil Rights Congress. The concert by Robeson, who was known for his strong pro-trade union stance, civil rights activism, communist affiliations, and anti-colonialism, prompted riots and attacks, with the local police doing little to intervene when concertgoers were beaten with bats and rocks. The concert was postponed by a week, and although the musicians performed without incident, they and the concertgoers were forced to run a gauntlet miles long of protesters who threw rocks through the windshields of the cars and buses. When a rock was thrown into the car that Pete was in with Woody Guthrie, Lee Hayes, Pete's wife Toshi, and their infant children, Pete saved it and used it to build the chimney of his cabin as a reminder of the Peekskill riots.
In the late 1940s, Pete sang with a group known as the Almanac Singers with Woody Guthrie, Bess Lomax, and Lee Hayes. In 1950, Pete and Lee, along with Ronnie Gilbert and Fred Hellerman, reconstituted the Almanacs as the Weavers, named after a play about a workers' strike. They did benefits for strikers, at which they sang songs such as Talking Union, about the struggles for unionization of industrial workers, such as miners and automobile workers, carrying on the folk tradition of transforming existing music to suit the current situation. Pete sang this song. You may recognize the tune.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. But one force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one, but the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. They have taken untold billions that they never toiled to earn,
1955, Pete was subpoenaed to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee, also known as HUAC. He said, and I quote him, "I am not going to answer any questions as to my association, my philosophical or religious beliefs, or my political beliefs, or how I voted in any election, or any of these private affairs. I think these are very improper questions for any American to be asked, especially under such compulsion as this."
For that position, Pete became part of the Hollywood blacklist, which prevented him from performing in public venues such as concert halls, on television and radio, and from making albums. So instead, he worked gigs as a music teacher in schools and summer camps and traveled the college circuit as a performer. Although the blacklist was intended to restrict the influence of its members, Pete's work made him far more influential as he spent decades working with children who grew up singing his music.
From the late 1950s on, Pete accompanied himself on his distinctive custom-made triangular hole 12-string guitar, an instrument that had been associated with Hoodie Ledbetter, known as Leadbelly, who wrote some of the first songs I ever learned to play on guitar. That guitar, and this one, was made by a good friend, Bruce Taylor, who is a member of the Walkabout Clearwater Chorus and also Pete's luthier, who had been making Pete's guitars for years. In 1998, Pete and Walkabout were rehearsing at my house for a concert in Central Park. I casually asked Bruce about an instrument that had been handed down to me by my grandfather, a short-necked string instrument with a banjo head and 8 strings. He didn't know what it was, so he asked Pete. Pete looked at it, tuned it, and started playing a banjo rag. Bruce and I were just totally amazed. So Bruce asked Pete where he had learned to play that. Pete very casually replied, "Oh, Woody taught me."
A few years ago, Paul and I took a civil rights journey to the Deep South. At our visit to the Rosa Parks Museum, we learned about her participation in the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee, where she and many others before and after her learned how to implement nonviolent civil disobedience. It was only a few months after her visit to Highlander that she refused to give up her seat on that Montgomery bus. On the wall, we saw a photo of Rosa Parks with Martin Luther King Jr. and Pete, who frequented Highlander to learn and teach civil rights songs, such as We Shall Overcome, which has become an anthem of civil rights movements around the world.
Pete continued his support of civil and labor rights, racial equality, international understanding, and anti-militarism, and he continued to believe that songs could help people achieve these goals. In 1967, the Smothers Brothers worked to get Pete Seeger on their show. Television networks had blacklisted Pete for 17 years from any broadcast TV shows because of his political views. The Smothers Brothers convinced CBS to allow Pete to appear on their show, and he appeared on the premiere episode of the second season on September 10th, 1967.
Among the songs that he played, one of them, Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, recounts a story about a World War II captain back in 1942 leading his men. He takes his men deeper and deeper into the Big Muddy as the big fool tells them to push on until the captain gets sucked into the mud. CBS censors had asked Pete to omit the last verse of the song, which connected the story to the Vietnam War. Pete, noting that the last verse was the whole point of the song, refused to do so and sang the entire song during taping. So CBS cut the song from the broadcast.
Following the cut of the song, Tom Smothers made sure that the story of the censorship appeared in the media. Because of the bad press, and probably because the Vietnam War had become even more unpopular in recent months, the Smothers Brothers were allowed to invite Pete back later in the season, where he again sang Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, and this time it was actually broadcast. 3 days following that broadcast, Walter Cronkite, known as one of the most respected people in America, closed his February 27th, 1968 broadcast with what would become his famous editorial commentary about the Vietnam War. Here's another example of a song you might know from Pete's anti-war music.
We hope you'll sing with us once we get
Once we have a
key established.
Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the flowers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the flowers gone?
Young girls have picked them, everyone.
When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young girls gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young girls gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young girls gone?
Gone to young men, everyone.
When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the young men gone? Long time passing. Where have all the young men gone? Long time ago. Where have all the young men gone?
Gone for soldiers, everyone.
When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time passing. Where have all the soldiers gone? Long time ago. Where have all the soldiers gone?
Gone to graveyards, everyone.
When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn? Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time passing. Where have all the graveyards gone? Long time ago. Where have all the graveyards gone?
Gone to flowers, everyone.
When will they ever learn? When will they ever learn?
When will we ever learn?
When will we ever learn? When will we ever learn?
Pete remained an activist throughout his life. For 50 years, he and his wife Toshi produced a festival along the banks of the Hudson called the Great Hudson River Revival, where thousands came each Father's Day weekend to celebrate the river, enjoy music and dance from all over the world, and learn about living sustainably on the earth. The festival, called Clearwater for short, still happens each summer, and now some folks who came to the earliest ones are bringing their grandchildren. Pete was not one to go quietly into the sunset. He spoke out against the Deepwater oil spill, joined protesters 60 years younger than he was at Occupy Wall Street and kept up with them, and sang for Farm Aid with Willie Nelson. At age 89, he recorded an album with members of Walkabout Clearwater, which won a Grammy. That same year, in January 2009, well, there he was on the National Mall alongside Bruce Springsteen and Pete's grandson, Tao Rodriguez Seeger. Clad in his trademark flannel shirt and woolen cap, strumming his banjo, and leading tens of thousands in singing "This Land Is Your Land" for Barack and Michelle Obama on the day before Obama's inauguration. When the concert was over, he slung his banjo over his shoulder and headed home to Beacon, New York. He had a class of local 4th and 5th graders waiting to write songs with him, so he skipped the inaugural ball. Incidentally, the album that resulted from that collaboration with the 4th and 5th graders, called Tomorrow's Children, also won a Grammy. Pete died in January of 2014 at the age of 94, just 6 months after his beloved wife, Toshi, passed away. For our meditation, we're going to play and then sing from Pete's song, Rainbow Race. So no Spirit of Life today.
One blue sky above us, one ocean lapping all our shores, one earth so green and round, who could ask for more? And because I love you, I'll give it one more try to show my rainbow race. It's too soon to die. One blue sky above us, one ocean lapping all our shore, one earth so green and round, who could ask for more? And because I love you, I'll give it one more try to show my rainbow race. It's too soon to die.
Please join Deb in the words for extinguishing our chalice.
Thank you so much, Paul, Sandy, and Nancy. What an extraordinary man and an extraordinary life. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, if you can bring your chalice close, and we are going to extinguish our chalice and join me in our declaration. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again. Our closing hymn today is one of my all-time favorite Seeger songs, If I Had a Hammer.
So, earlier we spoke about the Peekskill riots in 1949. At the concert, there was word of snipers in the hills, and after the riots of the previous week, the performers were concerned about inciting violence with overtly anti-fascist songs. Pete, being Pete, would not miss an opportunity, never missed an opportunity to send a message, though. So he shared this song as a subtle but firm anti-fascist message, a song that is as relevant today as it was then. It was translated into over 125 languages and has been recorded by artists as diverse as Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Trini Lopez. Please join us. Hopefully most of you know this song, be able to join us and sing it. Please join us for this closing hymn.
If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, hammer of justice. It's the bell of freedom. It's a song about love between my brothers and my sisters all over this land.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this very, very enjoyable and important service to us this morning.
So, for our closing words today, we want to sing "We Shall Overcome." Sandy mentioned earlier that Pete had been at the Highlander School, and it's important to sort of understand the background of this piece of music because it's so critical to our history. The song was published in 1947 under the title "We Will Overcome," but evolved through what we've come to know as the folk process, changing the time signature to 12/8 and the name and words to "We Shall Overcome." It became associated with the civil rights movement, that particularly starting in 1959, when Pete's co-author, Guy Carawan, stepped in with his and Pete's version as a song leader at the Highlander Folk School, which was then focused on nonviolent civil rights activism. It quickly became the unofficial anthem of both the U.S. civil rights movement and similar movements everywhere. Please sing with us as we all do "We Shall Overcome."
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
We shall live in peace.
We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
We are not afraid today.
We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
We shall overcome.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh,
And now for our postlude. This Land is Your Land was written not by Pete, but by his friend and mentor, Woody Guthrie. Today we will sing the verses that Pete sang to Obama, the ones that never made it into our 5th grade songbooks. The verse about the rich man's table after the second chorus is one that Pete added.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me, in the squares of the city, by the shadow of the steeple, by the relief office. I saw my people, I stood there hungry, I stood there wondering if this land was made for you and me. Was a great high wall there that tried to stop me? Was a great big sign there said private property? But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That sign was made for you and me.
Sing with us.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, to the Redwood Forest, to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. Here's Pete's verse. Maybe you've been working just as hard as you're able, and you just got crumbs from the rich man's table. Maybe you've been wondering, is it truth or fable, that this land was made for you and me? Nobody living can ever stop me as I go walking my freedom highway. Nobody living can make me turn back. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island,
To the shore
from
of
the
the
Redwood
singing, this land is
Forest
your
to the Gulf Stream
land. This land
water.
is mine.
This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me. One last time. This land was made for you and me.